This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
We've all tumbled down an internet rabbit hole trying to self-diagnose, and it leaves us more anxious than informed. Our feeds are full of wellness trends, but how do we know what's real, what's exaggerated, and what's just wrong? Health versus Hype from the American Medical Association breaks it all down. Emmy-nominated science communicator Trace Dominguez talks to doctors, influencers, and real people trying these trends, not to cancel them, but to understand them. Because when it comes to your health, who you listen to matters. So listen to Health versus Hype wherever you get your podcasts.
Work can be a little weird. Cringy training seminars, coworkers who won't stop talking about their plant, forgetting the mute button at an inopportune moment. We have to deal with a lot on any given workday. Sometimes it can feel hard to thrive and move forward in your career. Well, that's where LinkedIn comes in. LinkedIn helps you get ideas and insights from experts in your field, connect with people professionally, grow your network, and access tools designed to help you find the right fit for your next role. Whether you're just getting started, figuring out your next move, or looking to accelerate your career, LinkedIn is built to support you at every stage because LinkedIn is the network that works for you. Visit linkedin.com/knowstuff to learn more.
Welcome to Stuff You Should Know, a production of iHeartRadio.
Hey, and welcome to the podcast. I'm Josh Clark, and there's Charles W. Chuck Bryant, and there's Jerry, who's just flitting around us, sprinkling us with fairy dust so we can fly around with her too. And of course, all that makes this Stuff You Should Know.
That's right, the fairy edition.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. I asked for this. I think fairies are cool, and we're going to talk about them because I realize I had a very limited understanding of what fairies are, what qualifies as fairies, where they came from, what they can do, what they do, all that stuff. So we're going to get into it, Chuck, when we talk today about fairies.
That's right. And I think it can be summed up best by saying fairies have existed in many forms in lore throughout parts of Europe for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're good fairies, sometimes they're bad fairies, mm-hmm. Sometimes they're evil, sometimes they're fun.
There you go. That's all you need to know.
And now we're going to talk about all of that over and over for the next 40 minutes.
Well, what's really weird, that the first thing I didn't know is that fairies, as we understand them today, are relatively recent concepts. And that because, like you said, they pop up in lore all over the place and different times, going back a very long time, it's not like some group said, hey, these are what fairies are, and it just spread. Instead, groups around Europe in particular came up with these concepts of things that had fairy traits, but they didn't put the whole thing together as fairies until much later. So no one can really agree on what exactly a definition of fairies are, aside from something that they're kind of human-like usually, and they're associated with magical powers some way or another.
Yeah, because if you tried to do that, it would be like, well, here are Irish fairies from this period, and they're like this, and here are Scottish fairies from this period, and they're like this, and these come from Scandinavia in this period, and they're completely different, and here's their stories, which is what folklore is. It's different everywhere. The actual word fairy is much more recent than the lore of the fairy. Mm-hmm. It didn't come around in the language until late medieval period, but the lore of fairy goes back much, much, much further. And from the beginning, I guess we need to talk a little bit about elves because they are sort of in lockstep with fairies in that lore, in a way. Mm-hmm. One way is that elves were not, the kind of fun, lovely elves. They're not making cookies in a tree back in the early days. They were usually associated in the early days with illness, with rash, with health problems. If your cows all died, it could have been the work of elves, kind of an impy kind of creature.
Yeah, but that demonstrates like the idea that they brought, say, disease or illness, especially mysterious, suddenly onsetting disease or illness, like that's associated with fairies or elves in this case. And that also pops up in other places too, but they just didn't call them elves. They called them other things. But you just kind of see some like underpinnings of things that came to be part of fairy lore. And eventually they were like, all this stuff is so different, we're just going to have to chop the fairies up into different camps and categories, which they eventually did, and we'll talk about that later. But one of the things that they figured out, there's a guy named Ronald Hutton, who is a folklore scholar from the Anglo-Saxon period. He didn't live in that time. That's his focus, I guess. And he said there's like clues here or there, because nobody sat down at the very earliest periods and said, here's what fairies are, future historian, go tell everybody about it. They just pop up here or there, and they seem to pop up not just in folklore, but in actual like scholarly works from the early medieval period, where people are like, oh yeah, this guy ran into a fairy, and here's his story.
That's right. He did, if you look at the name, as far as like elves always being like impish or bad or monstrous even, that's not necessarily true, because there is a name, Aelfwine. I guess, would that be pronounced Elfwine?
Yeah, I think so. That's a great band name.
Yeah, not too bad, actually. It's an Anglo-Saxon name, but it means elf friend. So that's an indication that, there were friendly elves. And this came from Ronald Hutton. And when Ronald Hutton talks, people listen.
Wow.
A joke for our Gen X and Boomer friends.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of people say, well, okay, what would make the most sense is that elves, fairies, these kind of like supernatural creatures that live in close proximity and interact sometimes with humans, probably came from the early gods and the early nature spirits. And it wasn't until Christianity came along that they were kind of wiped out or demonized, literally demonized. Mm-hmm. And in Ireland in particular, they're like, yeah, they're actually related to one of the last native indigenous magic-using people who lived in Ireland before the modern Irish people like us alive today came along, in particular the Tua de Dana. They were like, again, like a magic-using people. They were people of the goddess Danu, who is also known as the Morrigan. And they said, okay, this is what elves and fairies evolved into from this group, this magic-using group, as humans kind of came in and pushed them out into the rural areas.
Did you just feel the entirety of our D&D audience stirring in their seat when you said magic user?
I think that, and get this one too, cleric.
They're all like, what? Did Josh say magic user?
Did he say fighter instead of knight?
So those Irish elves, like you said, descended from them and lived in fairy forts or fairy mounds, these sort of raised structures. Mm-hmm. If you are an archaeologist, you will say, actually, those were not for fairies. They were where ancient humans lived. But that notion persists, the magical notion persists such today that still in some places you cannot build roads where there are these places. Because not of the fact that ancient humans might be buried there, but because of the supernatural menace that might befall you if you disturb it.
Yeah, and I saw that archaeologists are like, great, for whatever reason we're preserving these archaeological sites, that's fantastic. But yeah, the most recent I could find was there was a highway being built in County Clare in 1999, and they were gonna basically tear up a fairy bush, and people were like, you do not want to do that. And they actually moved the road over so they didn't remove this fairy bush. This is almost in the 21st century that they did this, So there is this idea of, fairies do exist to some degree. People believe in it. And it's not just from this ancient folklore tradition. It actually was revived in the early 20th century in Ireland, became part of like nationalist pride, which is why it survives in such strength today, as we'll see.
Yeah, and was not, kind of concurrently while this was happening in Northern Europe, the British Isles, like Scandinavia, Germany, and the British Isles mainly. It was also at the same time coming out of classic Greek and Roman stories. Basically, this is where the sort of the human appearing fairy kind of comes more into play. That lived these very lavish lifestyles. They had kings and queens, stuff like that. Not necessarily saying they were human, because sometimes they were not, but they seem to always have some sort of connection to magic in some way.
Right. Yes.
And didn't like people, didn't like real regular humans, or at least didn't trust them.
Right. And it's from this belief in nymphs and satyrs. Again, these are like wood-dwelling sprites, magical people. They bear a really strong resemblance to elves in the British Isles. But again, these things evolved in an isolated manner. I guess the Romans did make it all the way to Britain. So I guess it's possible they brought the ideas of nymphs and satyrs with them. But I don't know. I definitely have the impression that this stuff evolved from the Celts.
Yeah, same.
Independently. So, but the name fairy actually comes from the Roman mythology of the Fates. Fairy, fates led to fairy. In English, fae and fairy, F-A-E and F-A-E-R-I-E, were magical or uncanny. There was an adjective that described that. And in fact, if you came down with sudden illness, you were considered to be fae-struck or fairy-struck. And get this, Chuck, I saw that the word stroke today for becoming suddenly paralyzed comes from elf stroke, which was what they used to call it in the medieval era when somebody suddenly had a stroke. That's what it came from. You were stricken by elves. You were elf stroke.
Elf Stroke's another good band name.
I think that's Elf Wine's debut album.
Did you know that actor Aubrey Plaza had a stroke when she was 20 years old?
No, I didn't. Wow, she fully recovered, huh?
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I think it had been out before, but she recently was on, I think, Howard Stern and talked about it like in depth. Maybe not for the first time, but I think it's been amplified recently. But yeah, very scary.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure, man. I think it's scary at any age, but especially when you're younger too, you know?
No, absolutely. All right. So we're in the 12th century now. Aubrey Plaza won't be around for a long, long time. There were a lot of traditions by this point firmly established about these, again, human-looking or at least human-shaped little supernatural creatures. Sometimes they weren't angels or devils. They kind of danced in between sometimes, depending on the lore and the story. Mm-hmm. And they lived in a human-like society sort of parallel to us and were a lot like us. They lived a lot longer. It's now occurring to me that Ruby and I, a few years ago, read a whole fairy series of books that was kind of fun about these children who find these fairies and go to their magical land. And it's very, now that I know this stuff, it's very much based on all this sort of traditional lore.
But was it positive, or were those kids in danger? Or?
Well, they were a little bit of both. The kids weren't in danger. It was kind of like a Narnia thing. Like once they went in there was like kind of good and evil to combat.
Gotcha. So yeah, that definitely does follow in the tradition of how there was a duality among fairies, and it wasn't even necessarily like in this world these fairies are good and these are bad. Although some cultures did separate them like that, but it could just be different folk beliefs that the same fairies, depending on where you encountered them, how you treated them, how you spoke around them, could go from good to evil in it, just like the flip of a switch. Yeah,
they did this in these books too, actually.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
A good example to me, Chuck, of how just randomly different fairies can be, what can be considered a fairy is Merlin from the Arthurian legends. Like, he's considered a fairy. His dad was either a demon or a fairy, and Merlin was at least half fairy, which would explain his sorcery skills. And then Morgan Le Fay was also part of the Arthurian legends, and they think that she is descended or based on the Irish Morgana that we talked about.
Yeah, that's right. One of the kind of maybe surprising things to learn is that at the time, if you were a writer in medieval times, you may write it as this is a real natural phenomenon that we just haven't studied yet and don't fully understand yet. Like it's looked upon as lore all these years later, but at the time, a lot of this stuff was kind of put out in historical accounts of the day, even not just like folklore books and stuff, as like, hey, this is a thing and we just don't understand it yet.
Yeah, it was very Fordian in nature, you know?
Yeah.
And then kind of wrapping up the medieval era, in the 13th century, Christianity stepped up and said, no, these fairies you're talking about, they are mentioned nowhere in the Bible. So therefore,
Yeah.
they're evil, they're devils, they're in disguise, they're meant to lead you astray. Stop talking about fairies. And if you know a fairy,
Right.
stop talking to that fairy. You're not allowed to be friends with them any longer.
That's right.
And it led to a great schism among some really wonderful fairy-human friendships. But eventually it recovered. And when we come back, we'll pick up starting around the 19th century when things really got hot again.
Hey, everybody. When you're at work, you never know when you're going to get interrupted, like when an office fire drill happens right in the middle of your presentation, or maybe construction is going on just outside your window. But with the Dell Pro laptop powered by Intel Core Ultra with vPro, no matter how many interruptions you have, your laptop won't be one of them.
Yeah, with a battery that's optimized for the way you work and built-in intelligence that quiets distractions the moment you're trying to focus, your tech won't slow you down, even when you're getting bounced from an office you forgot to reserve. The Dell Pro, built for those who stay in the flow. Find technology built the way you work at Dell.com/Dell-Pro. Built for you.
Our listeners love puzzles, paradoxes, and hidden patterns almost as much as we do. On TikTok, those fascinations come to life. People are breaking down physics, exploring geology, and explaining why the world works the way it does. You'll see impressive experiments, explanations that finally make sense, and connections you didn't expect. It's like having a lab, a lecture hall, and science museum in your pocket. TikTok is where wonder is shared, where curiosity turns into discovery, and where millions learn something new every day.
All cat parents understand the feeling of being ignored by your cat and often asking yourself, does my cat even love me? And there is only one solution to solve that, Sheba. Feed your cat Sheba and go from feeling ignored to truly adored in 12 days guaranteed or your money back. Sheba has a menu of products, appetizers, entrees, treats, and even a kitten's menu. So Sheba has a product for even the pickiest eater, like the Sheba Puree, which is made with bone broth. It's a protein-rich, lickable treat with chef-inspired flavors. It has a smooth and creamy texture that cats love. Plus, it supports a strong bond between pet parents and their cats with a hand-fed cat treat. It also contains no corn, wheat, soy, or artificial flavors. So instead of feeling ignored, you're suddenly the center of their world. It's basically a fast pass to favorite human status. Next time you're wondering if your cat loves you, grab Sheba Puree or explore their entire range of textures and flavors at your local retailer. To learn more, check out Sheba.com.
All right, here we go with Act 2, everybody. Fairies. The true story. We're in the 19th century now, or we're jumping ahead a little bit. We'll probably jump back as well.
Jump back, Jack.
That's right. But interest in the traditions, I think you mentioned earlier, like these sort of old traditions are being revived because of national pride. All this old folklore is kind of coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, central to a lot of these stories were the brothers Grimm, Jakob and Wilhelm, who we did, I think, a two-parter on the Grimm brothers, didn't we?
Yeah, we did one on the fairy tales, and I can't remember the other one. I guess it was on the Grimm tales.
Yeah, just on the Grimm brothers themselves. So those are from a while ago, but those are good if you want to check those out. But if you look at their 1812 collection, this is, I believe, before that they were telling sort of oral stories, and before they put them into like real literary works that had a lot more religion and a lot less of the sexy stuff. A lot of these were like really, really violent tales and feature, things, like little folks living inside of a mountain, magical creatures, helpful elves sometimes, but also really awful like violence and stuff like that, which of course fairies were a part of.
Yeah, and the fact that they're called fairy tales demonstrates what I was talking about earlier, that fairy was an adjective for anything magical or uncanny. So it encompassed all sorts of magical stuff, not just flying little humans or imps that tried to trick you into stuff.
Yeah, but this stuff is growing via previous folklore, obviously, but now like real literary works are starting to write about this stuff more and more in the 19th century.
Right. So people are, like you said, they're starting to have kind of a response or reaction to modernization, and one of the first responses was to kind of try to preserve the original traditional folklore. And it wasn't just the Grimms that did that. There was a novelist named Anna Eliza Bray, and she collected folk stories from her native Devonshire, England, and she published them in 1844. And what she found by going out in the countryside and interviewing the rural people there is that basically everybody believed in pixies, fairies, that kind of thing. They were just part of the fabric of life. And in particular, the people of Devonshire associated them with the souls of unbaptized babies who didn't go on because they hadn't been baptized, but they didn't go to hell or anything like that. They just turned into fairies, which is a pretty pleasant thing to think.
Totally. I love it. Also, late in the 19th century, none other than William Butler Yeats published, I don't know if it was the first one, but maybe one of the first big guidebooks almost about fairies. It was called Fairy and Folk Tales of the Irish Peasantry, published in 1888. And, retold popular stories, reprinted some stories. It sounds like a pretty easy gig, if you ask me. For Yeats?
Yeah. Well, you know what that reminds me of, Chuck, is do you remember that big coffee table gnome book from the 70s?
Like garden gnomes?
Yes. It was an illustrated guide to gnomes and how they lived and where they lived. It was
I don't remember that, but
books ever.
I bet I would recognize it if you showed me that. I know we did not own that, but it was probably on a lot of coffee tables.
Okay. Well, I'll buy it and then bring it over to you and show you. We'll sit on the couch and go through it together, okay?
Oh, that sounds nice.
So like you said, W.B. Yeats created this guidebook to the Irish fairies, and it actually became like kind of one of the authoritative tomes on the whole thing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I mentioned earlier that I think is really important, I didn't realize this, but in the British Isles, in Ireland, in Cornwall, in Wales, in the Scottish Highlands, as in the 19th century, as it kind of wore on, they really grabbed on to that tradition, that folklore of fairies, and just absorbed it into their modernizing national belief and pride. I had no idea about that, but it certainly does explain why there's still this, at least kind of a winking belief in fairies in the area still too, which I think is great.
Yeah, cool to rediscover those old traditions, not to specifically thumb your nose at the modernization of science and stuff like that. By the way,
and
making sure.
In America, I'm kind of jealous because in America we don't have fairies; we just have baseball.
Yeah, hey, baseball's pretty great though.
It is, but it's no fairies.
Yeah, that's true. Also, in 18th century literature was when we first saw wings on these things. I don't think we mentioned yet that up until this point, these were not sort of the Tinkerbells that you might picture flying around when you think of fairies with their little flitty wings. That happened in the early 18th century in literature a little bit, but really the Victorian period is where we get this idea of these sort of tiny little insect-like things, usually looking like women or at least shaped like women.
Mm-hmm.
And that became more commonplace as what you think of as fairies as the Victorian era.
Yeah, and the wings are typically done kind of like a really beautiful, colorful, translucent butterfly's wings.
Sparkly.
I've also seen that they are sometimes depicted with bird wings or bat wings, which I didn't like that last one.
I haven't seen those.
One of the guys who really kind of advanced our modern conception of fairies as, little beautiful humans with wings was a painter named John Anster Fitzgerald. And his paintings are just a joy to look upon. My favorite so far is Rabbit and Fairies. And I mean, it does what's on the label. It's a rabbit surrounded by fairies in this cute little grassy area. And it's just heartwarming stuff. It's like looking at old Care Bears images.
Oh, wow. I'm looking at that now.
Isn't that a great painting?
It's beyond the whimsy of it. It's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very lovely. But not expected like bright colors. It's very beige.
Yeah, but let's not overlook that whimsy because it is important.
No, it for sure is, because these are fairies after all. Not all art depicted them like that, though. It wasn't always these beautiful things, or at least that wasn't the reason behind it, because there's a little something in the art world back then called the fairy loophole. And that is, if you lived in a place at the time that had pretty bad censorship for butts and breasts and paintings, little workaround was to just paint it as a fairy, because they were usually not clothed at that point. And so you could say, hey, censor, you can't say anything. This is a fairy. That's not a woman.
See the wings? Dummy, beat it. This is actually what inspired me to do this episode on fairies, Chuck. There was
was it?
Great, why?
I just wondered where that came from, and now it all makes sense. We should have just done this one as a short stuff.
So we're going to do a short stuff within a larger episode right here, right now. We're going to talk about the Cottingley Fairies hoax, which was arguably the greatest fairy hoax of all time.
Yeah, this was in 1917. Photography was a thing at the time, and there was a 16-year-old named Elsie Wright and her 9-year-old cousin, Frances Griffiths, that's a tough one, and I even have teeth, who said, hey, we photographed some fairies by the stream near our home in Cottingley, England. Everybody, look.
Yeah, and so this was a time, we did an episode on spiritualism, and we talked about how it was a big response to so much death during like the Civil War and World War I. And I think Elsie's mom, Polly, was into the spiritual movement, and she took these pictures to the Theosophical Society, which is also into spiritualism at the time, and said, look what my daughter captured. Here's some fairies in photos. And everybody just went wild. Like they just, like if something can go viral in 1917, that is what happened with these photos. They were spectacular photos of Elsie or Frances interacting with these beautiful little winged fairies flitting around in the air around them.
Yeah, I had seen these somewhere. I don't know if you sent these to me or if I just came across them at some point in my past.
They're pretty famous.
No, well, yes, but also just like great and like super cool that this 16-year-old and 9-year-old pulled this hoax over, because it looks pretty darn good for the time. What they did was they copied images from a children's book and cut them out, added wings to them, and then used hairpins to hold that paper up and took pictures. And I think it probably helps that it was 1917 style photography, but pretty fun little tricky thing to do for these two young girls.
Yeah, and they were like, they didn't mean for this thing to become like a national phenomenon, but I think one of them later said, I think it was Frances, who's like, you could see the hat pins in the picture if you look closely enough. And yet that didn't matter, because the adults who were into spiritualism wanted so badly for some evidence that the supernatural existed, any fairy pictures will do, that they just bought the whole thing hook, line, and sinker. And in fact, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who created Sherlock Holmes, he got into spiritualism toward the end of his life. And because he was just such a trusted authority on things like mysteries and rationalism and all that stuff, he wrote a paper. And when the paper was released, he was saying essentially, this is real. I consulted a photography expert, and the expert said, these pictures show whatever was in front of the camera when the photo was taken. They haven't been doctored. And it is true. The guy was right.
No, that's true.
But he was saying, like, they haven't been doctored. They haven't been messed with. Like, this is a real picture of what you're seeing. And Conan Doyle said, okay, they're fairies. This guy proved it. These are real deal things. And not everybody believed it. I think there was a headline in one of the London papers when Doyle released his article that said, has Conan Doyle gone mad? Like, it was not necessarily well received by everybody, but in the spiritualist movement, it was like, we have proof finally.
Yeah. I wonder if the last line of that article said, perhaps it's best if he just sticks to Sherlock.
He stays in his Sherlock lane.
And that was the first instance of people using the word lane like that in a smarmy way.
So I want to say also, Frances and Elsie were, from what I can tell, Elsie went to her grave never admitting it was a hoax.
Oh, really?
Because Frances didn't admit it until 1983.
Oh, geez.
And she was saying, like, she didn't feel bad because obviously the adults wanted to believe this very obvious hoax. So, more power to them. I don't think she said the last part. I'm paraphrasing.
She was at a Men Without Hats concert. They're all dancing to Safety Dance. And she's like, hey, guess what?
Yeah. I have something to get off my chest.
There have been, Oh, good. So in 1957, there comes another paper from a folklorist named Catherine Mary Briggs, who did another sort of categorization of fairies that involved, what is this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
18, 92, 40.
I guess 7 categories, and we're going to go over those quickly here. The first is heroic trooping fairies.
Okay.
These are the kinds I was talking about. They were a little more aristocratic, that had the king and the queen, not to be confused with the second grouping, homely trooping fairies, which were, kind of farm dwellers who can maybe change in size, who might reward a human for help, who might punish a human for not helping or being unkind, and might even steal from humans.
Yes. There's another one, solitary fairies. They're usually tied to a place, usually in the countryside, say like the moors or something like that. And they will often like pose as something like a needy stranger or something like that, and to test the traveler's kindness to strangers. And if they pass the test, they might be rewarded with something. If they fail, they'll probably be punished by this magical fairy. Leprechauns are one of them. They're usually tricksters. There's one named Tom Tit Tot, who I read the story of, and it's great. It's got a kind of a Rumpelstiltskin-y vibe to it. But I think I like Tom Tit Tots a little more. So I say go check out Tom Tit Tot and his story.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of this, as it's occurring to me more and more, it sort of falls into the category of the what's the story that you tell when it's are you going to do the good thing or the bad thing? Is it a fable?
A lie?
Or no.
Morality tale? Yeah, fable
Yeah,
I think has a moral.
Yeah, I think sort of fables and morality tales where they're saying, well, good things will happen to you or bad things will happen to you according to your behaviors and whether or not you're like kind to the stranger passing through town. It's actually a fairy or a leprechaun.
Yeah. Well, I'll be.
What else we got? We got 3 more categories.
No, we've got 2. No, we have 3.
Well,
You're right.
The 3 is a catch-all.
Sure. Tutelary fairies, fun to say, but also include my favorite fairies, which are brownies, which are household helpers. And people will still leave out a little bit of bread, a little saucer of milk or something like that as a thank you gift to the brownies that live in their house and help them out with household chores. The very, very famous fairy tale about the cobbler who was helped out by fairies who made shoes for him every night and eventually made him a very wealthy man. Those are brownies.
I remember that.
Anybody helping out around the house, that's a brownie. And I just think that's the cutest, most down-to-earth, folksy concept ever, that there's little tiny fairies that help out around the house. And the other thing that they do, which I think is hilarious, they punish lazy servants who aren't doing enough work by pinching them while they sleep.
That's got to be where brownie points comes from, right?
Yeah, probably.
Don't you think?
Probably, yeah, because you do want to score points with the brownies to keep them happy. Because, in addition to helping out, if you don't reward them, they will sometimes start stealing. They'll make your milk go bad. They'll make it impossible for butter to churn into butter. They can mess you up. You don't want to mess with them. But if you keep them happy, like, you definitely want a brownie in your house.
They make your farts hang in the air long after it's passed.
Yeah, I know that kind of brownie.
Finally, there are nature fairies. These are the kind of water sprites and river sprites you were talking about, these spirits that dwell in nature. It's very self-explanatory. They protect animals usually and deal with the animals out there.
Yeah.
And then there's the catch-all category that I mentioned, which are the scariest ones, like the giants and the hags and the monsters of the group.
Like, yes, I get that is part of original fairy lore and like the widest possible use of the term fairy, but we've evolved so far beyond that. But how are you going to include like a monster and a giant into the fairy categories?
Yeah, totally. Giant's a giant.
Exactly. They're their own thing. Don't diminish them.
Yeah.
I say we take our second break, Chuck, and come back and wrap this up and talk some more about, get this, fairies.
Hey, everybody. When you're at work, you never know when you're going to get interrupted, like when an office fire drill happens right in the middle of your presentation, or maybe construction is going on just outside your window. But with the Dell Pro laptop powered by Intel Core Ultra with vPro, no matter how many interruptions you have, your laptop won't be one of them.
Yeah, with a battery that's optimized for the way you work and built-in intelligence that quiets distractions the moment you're trying to focus, your tech won't slow you down, even when you're getting bounced from an office you forgot to reserve. The Dell Pro, built for those who stay in the flow. Find technology built the way you work at Dell.com/Dell-Pro. Built for you. The universe is full of mysteries. Black holes, quantum physics, galaxies. On TikTok, millions of people are learning more about the universe around them every day. Scientists break down complex theories, demonstrate experiments, and connect dots between the cosmos and our daily lives. One scroll might reveal the concepts on the fabric of space-time, the next an optical illusion. It's discovery on a massive scale, where millions learn something new every day.
All cat parents understand the feeling of being ignored by your cat and often asking yourself, does my cat even love me? And there is only one solution to solve that, Sheba. Feed your cat Sheba and go from feeling ignored to truly adored in 12 days guaranteed or your money back. Sheba has a menu of products, appetizers, entrees, treats, and even a kitten's menu. So Sheba has a product for even the pickiest eater, like the Sheba Puree, which is made with bone broth. It's a protein-rich, lickable treat with chef-inspired flavors. It has a smooth and creamy texture that cats love. Plus, it supports a strong bond between pet parents and their cats with a hand-fed cat treat. It also contains no corn, wheat, soy, or artificial flavors. So instead of feeling ignored, you're suddenly the center of their world. It's basically a fast pass to favorite human status. Next time you're wondering if your cat loves you, grab Sheba Puree or explore their entire range of textures and flavors at your local retailer. To learn more, check out Sheba.com.
Okay, Chuck, so by the 19th century, early 20th century, like fairies were starting to congeal. All these different threads were starting to kind of come together. And yeah, they were solidifying like so much Jell-O pudding.
Yeah.
Remember the skin on top of that stuff? Ugh.
Of just like Jell-O or the pudding?
The
itself?
Jell-O pudding.
I don't remember. If it sat out, would it get a little topper?
As it sat, it would almost invariably like create like a
shell,
a skin at the top. And it was like flimsy and rubbery and like you did not want it. But I think some real sickos liked the skin of the pudding.
It's right here that I have to quickly sidetrack about a movie I just saw called The Substance.
Okay.
Have you read about this yet?
No.
It's the new movie with Demi Moore and Margaret Qualley that is a body horror film, to say the least.
Okay.
If you're into body horror, this is the going to go down in history as the all-time leader in that category. It is the most foul, horrifying, disgusting, but great thing that I've ever seen in my life.
I gotta see this.
Are you into that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I like all kinds of horror. Body horror is not my leading type of horror. It's usually a good ghost story, but I like body horror.
Well, go see The Substance. It is really something. I got the strongest stomach for that kind of thing, and I was literally feet pulled up in the theater, peeking through eyes like a small child.
So are you?
And holding my ears.
Are you into body horror?
I like a Cronenberg thing, but this is like Cronenberg on 10 million milligrams of steroids, however much that is. It's beyond the pale of anything that you could imagine for body horror.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
I'll see that. In the meantime, you see there's a classic body horror movie called Society from the mid-'80s.
Don't know that one.
And it's widely considered the all-time leader in horrible, horrific body horror. So
not anymore.
I can't wait to see The Substance, man.
Yeah, and it's got a great message. I can't remember the woman who made it, but her first movie is called Revenge, and it was great. Total sort of I Spit Upon Your Grave style revenge film that you can watch now. It's out on streaming, and she's just a very unique voice in film making these days. And a great message in this new one about women and aging and youth obsession with youth culture and stuff like that.
From what you described, the message is...
Yes, it's tough, man.
Good to see it.
I cannot get some of this stuff out of my head.
Okay, so let's get back to fairies, shall we?
Yeah, that all started with pudding skin, by the way.
Yeah,
So
fairies
just
congealing.
let your mind run wild with that association.
Okay, so by this time, fairies they're kind of becoming dual. They can be different kinds of sizes. They can be ugly or beautiful. And then from that point on, like they either have one or the other, usually polar extremes, right? So like they're either immortal or they don't have souls. So when they die, they just perish completely. Or they're fallen angels, but they're not demonic. Or wait, remember, they're maybe unbaptized babies. Like they're as disparate and weird as this sounds, like it's still way more put together than the threads used to be before the 19th century.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes they're solo fairies. Sometimes they are in little small communities or families. We have mentioned that a lot of times they live out in rural areas, in caves and wells, and hidey holes, other sort of bucolic rural spots, mounds and holes in the ground, things like that. Sometimes there is a fairyland, like in these books that I read, Ruby, where things are just magical and wonderful, or can go really wrong. A lot of times the beauty is an illusion. So there are some stories like if a human comes along and says the right spell or applies a magic ointment, they will be awakened to the true reality that all the treasure is garbage and the food is poison and stuff like that.
I found that interesting because the magic ointment jumped out at me because they also prescribed a magic ointment for witchcraft and to become a werewolf. And I don't remember what hallucinogen they thought was in that magic ointment, but I suspect they're referring to the same magic ointment that would make you trip balls.
Right. Oh, that's funny. Not Tim Walls, trip balls. They can't cross rivers usually or any kind of running water.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Holy water is not great for them, right?
No, and this is where the influence of the Christian church came in. They don't like holy water. They don't like cold iron. Church bells really drive them. They sound like nails on a chalkboard to them. And in fact, like just talking about religion can set a fairy off. That one historian from the 50s, Catherine Mary Briggs, said, "It is tactless in the extreme to mention Sunday to a fairy." It's one of the best lines I've ever read.
Well, the other thing you don't want to do is if you meet a fairy, don't call that fairy a fairy.
Right.
They don't want to hear that.
No, they want to be called fair folk, people of peace. One thing that everybody now agrees on about fairies is that they really respond to flattery and that they're very easily upset.
Right. Sorry, I had a joke I'm not going to tell.
Okay. You can tell me later.
I'll tell you later. One thing that you can do, like let's say you've got some disturbing fairy stories banding about that have to deal with human children, and maybe a fairy, swapping them out for a fairy, like they become a changeling essentially. If you're an unchristened baby and you think your baby is at risk to be carried off by a fairy, you wrap them up in daddy's clothes, put a Bible under their pillow. That's a good way. Or if you live a little dangerously, you can hang some iron fire tongs or some giant iron scissors over their cradle.
Which seems like a really bad idea.
Yeah, I'd go with the Bible under the pillow. And that's me talking.
You don't want iron scissors to fall onto your baby's crib.
No.
So this is where it gets really dark. In fact, there was a longstanding folklore all the way through the late 19th century that when a child started to develop disabilities or was suddenly struck ill, or I think was also born with like physical abnormalities, the folk belief was that the fairies had stolen the actual baby, the human baby, and replaced it with a fairy changeling, right?
Yeah.
And so you would kill the fairy changeling because you wanted your baby back in hopes that this would help get your baby back. And it was actually one of those things where probably some people, especially long ago, believed that what they were doing was actually killing a fairy baby. But it also served a really grim but kind of necessary for the time purpose of removing the baby that was never going to be able to help out on the farm, but was going to need some of the food from that farm to stay alive, from a very poor family to have to take care of that kid. And that is about as dark as fairies get. And there's some dark parts to fairies.
Yeah, for sure. And I would also like people to write in if they, like me, were singing the Chili's baby back ribs commercial in their head. The third time you said baby back.
Oh, yeah. I'll bet that happened. Nice. That's a gift to you, buddy.
I think we should close with some famous fairies because we mentioned that they had been had long been written about in literature, and some of that cream rises to the top, everybody. And the wheat is separated from the chaff, and you get some genuine fairy celebrities. Puck is the one I would love to mention because Puck was not just from the mind of William Shakespeare. Puck was a fairy or a demon, depending on, of course, various factors in medieval folklore. And Shakespeare, by the time he got around to writing A Midsummer Night's Dream, Puck was a very mischievous character who Shakespeare leaned on in that story. Puck as a character would help with chores around the house, maybe get rewarded with some bread and milk from the midwives, but could also play tricks on people like that spoiled milk again, or maybe trip an old lady walking through the forest.
Right. He also appeared on the first season of Real World.
That's right. Wasn't the first season, but yes.
So thank you for saving me a ton of emails.
Yeah. First season was London, Josh.
He also had a great nickname, Robin Goodfellow. Did not know that.
Yeah.
I'll just keep moving on. But you said that Shakespeare used him in A Midsummer Night's Dream. Shakespeare was the champ of using and describing and writing about fairies. And it turns out they think actually inventing fairies, because one of the most legendary fairies was the fairy queen, Queen Mab, who's described in Romeo and Juliet and just kind of spread from there. And they can't figure out where Shakespeare got this. So they actually think he might have made up this really definitive fairy queen, Mab, which is pretty impressive.
And I think we have to close by talking about the two most famous fairies of them all.
Who?
Tinkerbell and that tooth fairy.
Oh.
Tinkerbell, of course, created by the great and wonderful J.M. Barrie, author of the play and then eventually the novel Peter Pan. What a great character and what a great just thing that J.M. Barrie launched into the world, like all about Peter Pan. I've always loved Peter Pan and all the stories and iterations from the various movies and cartoons to the actual books themselves, and that book about J.M. Barrie, or the movie about J.M. Barrie, which was very good.
J.M. Barrie also invented the concept of fairy dust, and there was a Guardian article that describes why. I think I found it on Reddit, to tell you the truth. In the article, they say that Barrie invented fairy dust. So originally Peter Pan was a play, and then a few years later it became a novel. And the fairy dust appears in the novel because in the interim between the play and the novel's release, kids were trying to fly like Peter Pan. So we introduced fairy dust to say, like, you can't fly, kid. You don't have fairy dust. You have to have fairy dust to be able to fly.
So don't jump out of your window, for God's sake.
Exactly, because it's not going to work.
That's called a J.M. Barrie COA original.
And then the tooth fairy, you said, right?
Yeah, of course. Everyone loves the tooth fairy. Of course, this is the tradition of when your child loses their baby teeth. They put it under their pillow or maybe in a little pocket of a tooth pillow that you might have bought for $8 or whatever. Okay. In my case, Janet Varney gave us a tooth fairy pillow, which was very sweet as a gift. And you get something in there, like a little bit of money or a little treat or something like that. And that originated in Norse tradition in the 13th century when parents would pay a tooth fee.
Yeah, they would pay a tooth fee because baby teeth were considered good luck. So they were essentially buying the lucky tooth from their child.
Yeah, buying it out.
But the first appearance of the actual tooth fairy, as we understand it today, that didn't come about until 1908, when apparently a Chicago Tribune writer just made it up.
Yeah, but it was around long before that. But yeah, in print for sure.
And then we also can't not name check all of the Disney fairies, including Tinkerbell. There was the fairy godmother in Cinderella.
Yeah.
There were fairies in Fantasia.
All over the place.
Sleeping Beauty had three great fairies, Flora, Fauna, and Merryweather.
The greatest.
And that's all you really need to mention. The list goes on, but we're going to stop there.
Yeah. I wish I could remember the name of that book series. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Why don't you talk intelligently for 10 seconds?
Oh, God. Let's see. A little more about fairies. Fairies are great. Everybody typically agrees. That was one scholarly finding.
Backyard Fairies.
Okay.
I believe that is it.
What was that? That was the series?
I think it's Backyard Fairies.
Okay.
I might be wrong, though.
You sounded like you knew what it was a second ago.
Well, I'm looking. Yeah. Backyard Fairies by Phoebe Wall, Wahl. It's wonderful. And there are a lot of books, and they're a lot of fun if you have a kid that's, like 6-ish.
Okay, great. Thanks.
To read to.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Well, Chuck recommended a children's book series, which, as everyone knows, unlocks listener mail.
I'm going to mention this, a quick mistake we made. This is from Brad. A few people have written in, and this is something we've mistaked on before. Mistaked on?
I love it.
Hey, guys, I just finished listening to your History of Glasses episodes and noticed a little mistake and figured you'd love when people write in to correct you.
Mm-hmm.
When Josh was listing famous wearer of monocles, you mentioned Monopoly guy. Rich Uncle Pennybags is apparently his name. A great example of the Mandela effect, guys, because he never wore a monocle. I'm pretty sure you even mentioned this in your episode about the Mandela effect and probably in your Monopoly episode as well. So this may be a 3-timer. Anywho, you guys are the best ever. I hope you make episodes for at least another couple of decades. Rock on, Brad.
Rock on yourself, Brad. That was a great email, and we appreciate it, and we appreciate you. Thanks for pointing that out. It is so interesting when that Mandela effect comes up. Agreed.
I thought he had a monocle too.
I even don't believe what Brad's saying right now. I'm so convinced he had a monocle at some point.
Yeah, I looked it up. I double-checked, and there have been drawings of him with monocles, but nothing. That's not canon. Like, no official Monopoly stuff. And I've been playing Monopoly. We've been playing as a family, so I'm surprised it got past me.
Okay, all right, great. You got anything else?
Got nothing else.
And that was from Brad.
That was from Brad.
Okay, well, if you want to be like Brad and get in touch with us, send us an email, too. Send it off to stuffpodcast@iheartradio.com.
Stuff You Should Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.
Geico presents a 30-second podcast between your podcast. Today's story is shared by one of our listeners. It's called Betrayed by Bill. It was in that moment I caught who was staring back at me in betrayal, or more like what? My insurance bill. With trembling hands, I grabbed my phone and switched to Geico, saving about $900 in the process, and never to be betrayed again. Now that was bloody riveting.
It feels good when the story ends with savings. It feels good to Geico.
Hey, quick question for the parents listening right now. When's the last time your kid asked for something and you actually felt good saying yes? Because lately, a lot of families have been hearing the same thing. Can I have Lingo Kids, please?
And here's the thing. Lingo Kids is the #1 entertainment platform for young kids with more than 4,000 interactive games, songs, and shows. Astronauts, wild animals, superheroes, dinosaurs. It's literally everything kids love all in one place.
So when they ask for it, you can actually feel good saying yes. Download Lingo Kids for free and start exploring today, or unlock even more amazing content with Lingo Kids Plus. And if you go with the yearly plan, you can save up to 60%. Just search Lingo Kids in the App Store or Google Play. Lingo Kids, everything kids love. You know, you could be adored by everyone and still completely ignored by your cat. Trust me, I know. But if you feed your cat Sheba, you can go from being ignored to truly adored in 12 days, guaranteed, or your money back. Sheba has a full menu of products, appetizers, entrees, treats, even a kitten's menu. It's so cute, so Sheba has a product for even the pickiest eater. Like Sheba Puree, it's made with bone broth, they're chef-inspired flavors, it's got a smooth and creamy texture that cats love, and contains no corn, wheat, soy, or artificial flavors. It's food that your cat's gonna love. To learn more, check out Sheba.com. That's SHEBA.com.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.